On this short video, I want to discuss the Jewish name Yehudit, or as Ashkenazim pronounce it, Yehudis. It's a female name, not very common, but it occurs once in a while nowadays. And I wanted to mention a few interesting ideas about this name because it occurs in this week's Parsha. This week's weekly reading, Parsha Toldot, is the only place in the Torah where this female name occurs. And interestingly, it does not occur in regards to the family of Jewish people. It's actually a name of one of the wives of Eisav, Esau. Very interesting, right? You'd expect a name like that to be very Jewish, Yehuda, Yehudit, and we'll talk about it in a moment. In fact, our sages also say that when Eisav took one of the Canaanite women, he specifically changed her name to Yehudit so that her name sounds more Jewish, kind of, as if she is a kind of convert to, I guess, monotheism. There was no Judaism yet in full sense of the term, but there was monotheism, and the family of Yitzchak, of course, was very unique, and joining it meant some kind of a procedure of proto-conversion, if you could call it that way. So a lot of times today also, when a person converts to Judaism, he or she takes a new Hebrew name. So according to this, Yehudit was specifically named to sound more Jewish, so that Yitzchak doesn't really realize that she's still worshipping idols. Of course, it says later in the Parsha that the wives of Eisav were continuing to worship idols, and they constantly brought only problems, on the sadness to Yitzchak and Rivka. The truth is, I should correct myself. It doesn't openly say in the written Torah that they were worshipping idols, but it just says that they brought what's called morat ruach. They were very upsetting to Yitzchak and Rivka, and Chazal say they continue to worship idols. Whatever the case may be, the obvious question that everybody asks is, why would Yehudit be a Jewish name in those times? We understand why much later a Jew, the word Jew in English also comes from Yehuda, Yahud. There were a lot of different variations of this word in various languages that, of course, meant a Jew. We'll find Mordechai HaYehudi, even though he was from the tribe of Binyamin, he wasn't from Yehuda, but all Jewish people at a certain point started being called Yehudi, after Yehuda. There may be a few reasons for it. First of all, the majority of Jews were from Yehuda, from the tribe of Yehuda. And secondly, the word itself, Yehuda, has apparently very Jewish connotations. Leah named her son that way. We'll learn it in the next week's Parsha, because she wanted to thank Hashem after she had her fourth child, her fourth son. She said, I will now thank Hashem, from the word Hodaya, thanking Yehuda. Notice also that the word Yehuda is almost Hashem's name. If you remove the Dalet, it becomes completely Hashem's name. So in the name of Yehuda, there is Hashem's name encoded in a certain sense. So it definitely became a very Jewish name, Yehuda, and of course all Jews are called Yehudim. And like I said, the word Jew in English and many other languages comes from that word. Just letter J is a weird letter that in various languages is pronounced differently. In German, for instance, and Polish and others, the letter J is pronounced as Y. So that's why Yehud became Jew. But whatever the case may be, the question is, how did Eisav think of the name Yehudit for his new wife? How would he think that this is somehow related to Jews, or to Yaakov's family, before even Yehuda was born? Right? At this time, Yaakov wasn't even married. So when Eisav was getting married, there was just the family of Yitzchak. Presumably, the word Yehuda did not associate with the Jewish people yet. The word Hebrew that comes from Ivri, that could have been associated with the Jews. And even there are different interpretations of what this word means, and whether it included just the Jews or many other nations, possibly those who come from Ever. But certainly the word Yehuda or Yehudim is a much later term. So the answer may be is, like I said, the word Yehuda is not only because of how Leah named her son, but the word Yehudit probably associated with certain positive features of Judaism even before Yehuda or Judaism. By the way, Judaism, of course, also comes from there. Judaism. So Yehuda, even though he was named later, and at this point Yaakov wasn't even married yet, but still it could be that the word Yehudit did sound as a Jewish name. In fact, it's a Jewish name par excellence, right? Jew, Yehudit. So I wanted to ask you, as I said, in the Bible there is no other Yehudit anywhere. But there is a later book, which is not really part of our Bible, but it was preserved by some non-Jewish, actually it was usually these types of books, that Apocrypha they call it. It's Jewish books, but preserved by Christian church. An interesting thing, right? We're not talking about purely Christian books. These are Jewish books. They have nothing to do with Christianity. But what happened was our sages did not consider them biblical. They didn't think these books are written Beruach HaKodesh, that they deserve to be preserved. In those times, nothing else was preserved except the books that were considered to be written Beruach HaKodesh, with divine spirit, so-called, meaning they had to be prophetic books. Nothing else was preserved. All the oral law, all the midrashim, everything was only oral. It was later that they started writing these things. So in the times when this book of Yehudit was appeared, was published, our sages said, no, it's not Beruach HaKodesh, it's just a story. Whether it's authentic or not, I don't know, but maybe they consider it authentic, but not with Beruach HaKodesh. Maybe they didn't consider it authentic at all. Maybe they considered it partially authentic, but whatever the case may be, they did not preserve it. But the books still circulated in various communities outside of the Chazal's influence, and later was preserved by various Christian churches. Not the Protestants, but the Catholics and the Eastern churches preserved it. So it's called Yehudit. And it talks about some woman that saved the Jewish people from, in some versions, I think the versions in this book actually that happened all the way in the times of Assyrians, but later Midrashim apparently incorporated the story as that it happened during the Greek times. But whatever the case may be, there was a time, supposedly, that some Yehudit saved the Jewish people. She pretended to come to a certain officer of the enemy and killed him, and because he was, of course, trying to destroy the Jewish people, and she pretended that she'll come to him, and she was beautiful, and he fell for it, and he fell asleep, and she gave him something to drink so that he falls asleep, and then she was able to kill him. Something like that. So, like I said, whether the story is authentic is a big question. Maybe it's based on a real story that happened, but the various versions of it were spread far and wide in all kinds of nusachayot, various versions. One of the ones you might have heard is that it somehow has to do with Hanukkah. And even that this Yehudit was the daughter of Yochanan Kohen Gadol and things like that. So it's just one of the many versions of the story. But like I said, it's not clear if it happened, if it did, at what time it happened. But the minhag to eat during Hanukkah is actually coming soon, less than a month from now. The minhag to eat milchiks has to do with this, with one of the versions of the story. That this woman gave milk and or cheese or something like that, and he fell asleep because that milk products cause a person to fall asleep, and that's how she was able to kill him. But like I said, this story is not nowhere in the Talmud and nowhere in our Tanakh, in our Bible, so it's not considered very authentic, but maybe some midrashim that existed. I don't know if it's preserved in any authentic midrash, but some Rishonim, some commentators from less than 1,000 years ago do bring the story in various versions of the story. So the last question is, are there people with name Yehudit, at least in the times of Talmud? And the answer is yes. In the times of Talmud, there was at least one very important woman whose name was Yehudit. Who may be able to answer who this woman was? If you learn the entire Talmud, a large part of the Talmud, you'd probably know right away. It was the wife of Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia, if you don't know, he was probably the greatest rabbi after Rebbe. Rebbe was the one who composed the Mishnah, and Rabbi Chia was a little bit younger, and he came from Babylonia, and he was the greatest rabbi basically of the next generation. He was close to Rebbe, and after Rebbe died, he would probably remain the greatest rabbi of the time, Rabbi Chia. So this Rabbi Chia had a wife whose name was Yehudit. By the way, there is a small brochure by Rabbi Reuben Margulies who talks about various names in the Talmud and various hakiras on that. Like, for example, the double names, right? The whole question of when did it become common for people to be named with two names. Like, my name is Chaim Michoel, right? It wasn't always true that most people weren't named with two names. So he discusses, and he actually brings a number of sources that it seems that it was actually a very old custom, at least in some circles. But one of the chapters in this book is Dafka, the names of women in the Talmud. So he brings various names and discusses the etymology in some cases. A very interesting research, Hakira, of names of women. But anyway, so Yehudis became a name that is not very common, but it exists among the Jewish people. And like I said, the wife of a very important rabbi, who herself was a very important person in her own right, of course, she was named Yehudit. And on this I'll end. And if you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.